last week I told the audience that was listening to the sermon here that I said we would do the resurrection sermon the week after the crucifixion sermon. Well, this is a two-parter. I hope you come back again next week with us, but I got to lay foundation for this sermon, and then we'll bring it home the next sermon. I don't doubt that anybody in here, if we live in this world, in our own human relationships, have been disappointed or disgruntled about how a relationship ended, or sad about how a relationship ended. Imagine the mother who carries a child for 9 months, and then at 1 year old, the child dies in the crib. She has invested, she has did the room up, she's prayed, she's been excited for the child, she's nursed the child, she's taking care of the child, and through no fault of her own and through no fault of the child, that child is taken away. Can you imagine what she would feel? The anger that she might have down deep, the sadness she might have, all the dreams and hopes and goals that she would see her young little boy grow up, go to college, get married, have children. Imagine the disappointment. I just thought he would live until he was 60 and 70 and I would get to see my grandkids. Or imagine the woman who is excited and in a relationship and she's now engaged to a man she's been dating for 2 years. There's excitement, there's joy, she's getting her dress and she's planning her wedding, but at the same time she's praying. She's on her knees praying. She's praying, Lord, if it's not your will, then don't let this come to pass. If it's your will, then let this come to pass. She's humble. She's standing on her knees. And within that time, in the engagement period, 2 months before they get married, that man then says, you know what? I'm going to pull out of this thing. I'm going to walk away. Imagine the sadness. She's invested time, 2 years of her life. She's invested money, emotions. She's given him a part of herself, her heart, everything. Can you imagine the pain and suffering? But she was praying that God would do his thing. Now, within 2 months of him calling off the engagement, he's already dating another girl. Can you imagine? Y'all, do you understand the pain? Now, all of us maybe have not had situations like that, but we've had situations where we made an investment into something, where we put our time into something, where we've loved something, where we've committed to something, and it didn't end the way we thought it would. And when it didn't end the way we thought it would, we became disgruntled, we became discouraged, and in some ways, some of us became depressed. Disciples understand what you feel. The disciples left mother, father, wives, and children to take up their cross and go to seminary with Jesus. Seminary is Bible school. They got field work and they got theology work. Jesus taught them and then he put it into action in their daily walk. They committed to go and they left. Jesus started his public ministry at 30 and he died at 33. For a 3-year period, they left father, mother, child, wives, and everything to walk and go with Jesus wherever he went and to learn what it meant to be a follower of Christ. They committed it all, y'all. They left. They left jobs. Y'all remember the story of Peter? You remember the story, right? Peter and his boys James and John, right? They had a fishing boat. They had a business. They left it, dropped their nets, and followed the Lord and made a commitment. And they took up their cross and followed him. At the end of that process, the Lord just died and left. So I bet you can understand. All of a sudden, their leader has been executed, y'all. To their surprise and disappointment, they are hurt and leaderless, y'all. Now, we got to be easy on the disciples. Now, to take it easy, I'm going to tell you why. Can you even imagine what it means to be led by Jesus? We don't even have a concept of that. Our greatest leaders are still sinners. Our greatest, most godly people are still struggling with sin and make bad decisions sometimes. Can you imagine being led by a perfectly loving, perfectly kind, perfectly wise, perfectly powerful leader who never makes a mistake and never sins? Imagine that. he loved them the way they were supposed to be loved. He took care of them the way they were supposed to be taken care of. Anytime they needed or struggling, he was there to provide their needs. Can you imagine him leaving? Now watch this. The difference between any other leader and Jesus, it is inappropriate for any of y'all to worship a leader. Pastor, president, I don't care what it is, CEO, your boss, it is inappropriate and sinful for you to worship a leader. But in this case, with Jesus, it was very appropriate for them not only to follow him, but also to worship him. He is God, a very God. And he left them. He left them. I know they was disgruntled. I know that, man, you ever done something like, man, I waited all this time for this? Have you ever had that happen to you? Where you I remember one time we stood in a movie line. I don't remember the movie, but we was in line a long time. And we finally got up and saw the movie. And I was like, I could have stayed at home. I could have stayed at home. That was pure garbage, right? So all of us had that anticipation where you come to the end and you like, is this it? Do you see what I'm saying? The disciples are feeling that. Now let's develop the scene of this story, y'all. We got to get into the setting. I got to put you into the setting. The scene is early Sunday morning, around sunrise, when the sun is rising. The woman who cared for Jesus and his disciples arrive at the tomb to take care of the body. These women took care of Jesus and the disciples. When Jesus and them needed some fried catfish and fries for the day, these women would have been the one that fried it and took care of their need. When Jesus needed a fresh pair of clothes or some help with washing, these women financially took care of these men. Not just Jesus, y'all come on here, I got to cook for y'all. I know y'all tired, come eat with us. They were going to take care of the body. The women leave the tomb excited, scared, fearful, and confused because when they came to the tomb, an angel said, he is not there, he's arisen. Now they didn't see the body in the tomb, but you imagine them now. We came down with all the fresh spices, we was gonna put it on because you know dead people stink. So we're gonna put them on there just to preserve the body a little longer. And they had to leave. What just happened? Now what would have been natural is believe somebody has stolen the body. But it was a Roman soldier out there as well, right? Protecting the tomb. What's going on? They're scared, they're fearful and confused. They find the disciples. The disciples are still hanging out together because they're fearful and scared. And they're also confused and disappointed. Here's where our story picks up, y'all. Look at verse 9. Here's where our story. Luke chapter 24, verse 9. Coming out of the Christian Standard Bible, but reads very close to the Holman Christian as well as the ESV. So Luke chapter 24, verse 9. Returning from the tomb, this is the ladies, they reported all the things to the 11 and to all the rest. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary, the mother of James, and the other women who were with them telling the apostles these things. But these words seemed like nonsense to them, and they did not believe the women. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. When he stooped to look in, he saw only the linen clothes. So he went away amazed at what happened. Look at verse 9. You'll notice that the women tell of Jesus' resurrection to the 11. It was 12, right? Y'all remember what happened to the one, right? Judas died. He's already killed himself. And to watch this, all the rest. It doesn't name those people. They are nameless at this point, but it says to all the rest, right? So you got the 11 disciples and to all the rest, which is a number we don't know. She came, and these women came and reported what they saw at the tomb. Now look at verse 11. The report given to the men by the women, look at the text. Look what your text says. Yours may say seems like idle talk. Mine says it seems like nonsense. Now let's define that word because we use an American word for that, but let's get into this. It means silly talk. It means foolishness, right? Now, I did not put this there, but this is totally ironic. It also means trumpery. Yeah, I knew when I put that in there, y'all gonna be, I did not. I never knew that was a word. So I looked at the dictionary. Trumpery means this. It means fake talk. It's what they would use when they describe jewelry that ain't real, but looks real. You get what I'm saying? That's the word, trumpery. So we'll move on, but y'all do get the illusions, don't y'all? When something looks real, but it's fake, right? So when the report was given to them by the women, the men listened to it, and I'm saying for the most part, outside of maybe Peter, I got to go check this thing out. They were like, man, y'all talking trash. Gone. They basically blew them off. Now that's what we got. That's the scene we in, y'all. Now let's deal with this a little more. Let me give you something to leave with. If you don't remember anything about this sermon, remember this. When you can't understand God's plan, you must learn to trust his word. When you can't understand what's going on in the natural world and what you can see, you must lean and trust in what he has already told you. Pastor, what do you mean? Well, maybe you're struggling to put food on the table for your family. But if you're a Christian and God told you that he would never leave you nor forsake you and he will provide all your needs, don't worry about so much what's going on in the natural world, which is the fact you don't have enough money to put food on the table. At that point, you lean on what God has said. So when you look at this whole story, in a sense, he is teaching the disciples to trust his word when they don't understand his plan. So let's go first. One point today, that's it. The one point is the disciples' eyes are closed. And let me give you your title again. I didn't earlier. I always forget. Lord, help me to see. That's your title. Lord, help me to see. The first point is the disciples' eyes are closed. And y'all know I don't mean that literally. Look at verse 13, where TJ began to read today. 13 says this, now that same day, two of them were on their way to a village called Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem. Verse 13, Luke tells us on the same morning of the resurrection that the women reported of the resurrection, 2 of the disciples who were a part of the conversation left Jerusalem and headed towards Emmaus, which is about 7 miles outside of Jerusalem. So you remember that 11 and to the other ones? You remember the text said that? And to all those other ones? These 2 disciples was a part of that group. We only know one of their names. His name is Cleopas. That's the only one we know. And then he was walking with somebody else who was unnamed. So they were there when the women reported what happened. And now they're leaving Jerusalem, probably with the disciples, as the other ones ran to see what's happening in the tomb and came back. These 2 went towards Emmaus. Now let's look at verse 14 and 15. In the midst of an argument these 2 gentlemen were having, Jesus joins the conversation. These 2 brothers were debating, and in the midst of that debate, Jesus joins in the conversation. They were most likely, y'all, arguing about the events of the cross and crucifixion and what the women have just told them. They are most likely trying to wrap their heads around all these things that are being said, right, about his death and his rising. They're trying to make sense of what's happening, but they're having trouble believing, right? Which once again, don't be too hard on the disciples. I want you to put yourself in their shoes. I want you to try to walk in the situation that they were walking. It would have taken great faith for them to just trust. They are struggling in their faith right here. So this ain't a point that I even wrote down, but let me make this point as a Christian. And these disciples are strong. They are strong individuals. We know that, right? Because they have walked with Jesus and committed their lives and given up things to walk with him. They have attached themselves to Jesus, who was just crucified. So we're not talking about some immature brothers. We're talking about some brothers that are mature and are walking, but their faith is weak right now. What does that tell us? What do we need to hear? What we need to hear is that because you stumble and get weak in your faith, it does not mean you are not a Christian. And it does not mean that somehow God is rejecting you. Stumbling and struggling in your faith is a part of the Christian walk. It just is. You show me somebody, I don't never stumble in my faith. I'll show you somebody who ain't been through nothing. I just as quick as I'm saying, if you've been through something, you have gone through that. Lord, I don't get what you're doing. I'm having trouble trusting you through this pain. And this is what's going on here. Now look at verse 16, y'all. This is a strange verse. Let's put 15 to pick up some context. While they were discussing and arguing, Jesus himself came near and began to walk along with them. But they were prevented from recognizing him. You see that 16? Sit right there. Sit right there. This is probably one of the key verses in this whole thing. Interesting text. Now, let me ask you this question. These men spent 3 years with Jesus on a continuous sleepover. Are you following me? 11, 12 grown men who generally slept together, ate together, fellowship together, went to sleep, all that together. How would they not know that that Jesus is talking to them? Even if they couldn't see his face, they know his voice. How is it? So theologians have offered theories. One of those, after his resurrection, he took on another body. I don't agree with that. He changed his voice. I don't agree with that. How is it that they cannot recognize their leader? How is it that they can't see truth that's standing right there in front of their face? How is it that this man this is my boy now, this is my leader, how is it I cannot recognize him? Because the Bible tells us Jesus rose bodily from the grave with the same body he had when he was on the earth, with different properties. But as far as his look, it was the same. So we got to examine this. Now that's the answer to this question is not coming this week, it's coming next week. But here's the question. Who prevented them from seeing, and why did he do that? Who prevented them from seeing truth? But here's the truth, y'all. You can have it where truth is staring you right in your face, and you still can't see it. He walking with them, and they still couldn't conceive truth. What do you mean, Pastor? Well, have you ever talked to somebody before? I don't care, political issues, religious issues, or just wisdom issues. Just wisdom, just basic wisdom. Well, Pastor, he beats me and he cheats on me. What should I do? Leave. But right in front of your face. It ain't complicated. Now, I know it's hard emotionally, but if he's beating on you and cheating on you, that truth is right in front of your face. But that's not the only one. You see what I'm saying? We have truth, but how is it that sometimes we can't see what's right in front of our faces? We're going to come to that conclusion later, but let's go even deeper. For now, we're just going to accept the fact that they are walking with a man they spent 3 years with and don't know who he is. We'll deal with that in part 2. Are you following me? Now, verse 17 through 19. Let's do it. Let's go a little further. Jesus dips into their conversation and asks them what they're arguing about. And they bring up Jesus up to speed on what happened in the last week. First, they are a little indignant that Jesus was unaware of the latest event. They are a little indignant that Jesus is unaware of the latest events that happened in the last week. Now watch your text now, verses 17 through 19. Jesus asked them, what things, that's a question, have happened? Remember this principle. You know I gave y'all something to hang your hat on, but remember this principle. When Jesus asks you a question for clarification, it's not for him, it's for you. All right? When you get a question from Jesus, from the scriptures or anything, he already knows what went on. The question ain't for him, it's for you. So he asked them, what's been going on, fellas? Can you bring me up to speed on the events that's happened the last couple days? Now these brothers get indignant. Man, how you from Jerusalem and you don't know what's going on? So clearly they don't know they're talking to the Lord. They don't know they talking to the Lord. They asking, this thing that happened a couple days ago was so publicized, right? You couldn't miss it if you was in this area. An innocent man was executed. The religious leaders caused that execution, and it was a celebration amongst the religious leaders for Jesus' dying. So what you got here is he was handed over. So now in verse 19 through 20, these brothers now explain what happened. He asked them, so they said to him this in verse 19 to 20. The things concerning Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, powerful in word and action and speech before God and all the people. Verse 20. And how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. So they gave him a Detroit News version of what happened. Let's look at that. They tell you line by line. First, he was of Nazareth. They told you where he was from. Second, he was a powerful prophet in action and speech. Action, miracles, all of that, and speech. He was a dynamic preacher. Dynamic preacher. Before God and all the people. In other words, he was honorable before God, right? And the people had to respect him. Now, these words sound good to us. They sound flowery to us. They sound like the right thing to us, right? Man, that boy could preach. Not only could he preach, he could do miracles, right? This man was powerful, right? These men watched him heal the blind, feed the 5,000, and raise the dead. They saw that. They also heard him say things like, before Abraham was, I am. But here's the thing, y'all. When they just describe this about the Lord, he's a powerful prophet in word and action and deed. Really all they're saying is this, and listen to this. He's like Moses, Elijah, or John the Baptist. He about like them. Because Moses performed miracles, Elijah performed miracles, other prophets performed miracles, and other prophets were great speakers. So when these men described Jesus, they described him simply as a prophet along the lines of Elijah and Moses. Y'all seeing the issue with that there? Now, Jesus is a prophet, but he is in a class all by himself. They put him in the class of all the other prophets, right? And so really, when he died, whatever thoughts they had about him being this Son of God, powerful Messiah and all that, left. He's just a prophet, godly, powerful like Elijah. They were giving him respect, but they were not giving him the respect that he truly deserves. And look at this. And he was executed. He was executed. Watch this. Just like all the other Old Testament prophets. Isaiah was sawn in two. Elijah he was taken up. But Jeremiah was murdered and killed. Most of the great men of God in the Old Testament, the Jews killed him. So the way they describe this is, and he was executed. Just like, let me go take you back, John the Baptist, right? Just like him. So now verse 21 now, y'all, this gives us some meat as to why they are struggling and disappointed. This is why they were hurt. This is why they were discouraged. look at 21, and I want you to see it for yourself. 21. Look at verse 21. And verse 21 says this. Luke 24. Let me get there myself so I can read it for you. 24 and 21 says this. But we were hoping that he was the one who was about to redeem Israel. Beside all this, it's the third day. Now, there's your meat. There's the discouragement. There's why they have some low-key bitterness. This is why their faith is weak. This is why they're struggling. This is why they're looking at the man they're talking to and be like, yeah, he was supposed to. We thought he was going to do this. We thought he was going to do that. He didn't do it. He died just like all the other prophets. He was a great man, godly man, but he died just like all the other prophets. Just a man, you know. You see what I'm saying? He said this, but we thought. So what the disciples are describing, y'all, is disappointment. This is what they're describing. We left family, we left friends to support this great prophet, yet he has disappointed us. He was a great prophet and preacher, but he did not fulfill our greatest hopes and dreams. What was their greatest hopes and dreams? It's in that scripture. Look at it. Look at it again. Verse 21. We were hoping that he would redeem us. Now, they're not talking about spiritual redemption, which is salvation. They are talking about redeemed us from the oppression of Rome. That's what they expected. That's what they thought was going to happen. You imagine that. We thought he was going to be like Moses, because that's what Moses did, right? You remember what Moses did, right? He relieved them from the oppression of Egypt, and then God had a nerve to swallow up the whole army in the Red Sea. This is what they thought was going to happen at this point. They are functionally like, man, I thought it was on and popping at this point. I thought he was going to set up his kingdom, put on his crowd, and we was going to be with him banging and slanging, dominating Rome, killing all these people who've been overtaxing us, killing all these people who have enslaved us, killing all these people in the whole system. That's what we thought when we signed up. Now, I believe all of them are genuinely saved. I believe they committed to Christ. But within that, they had some hopes that at the end of this thing, oh my gosh, I'm going to be broke off on this side of glory. That's what they thought. Now, why did they think that? That's the natural question. How did they come to that conclusion? Let me take you one place. Just one. Go to Isaiah 9, 3 through 7. Go to Isaiah 9, 3 through 7. How did they get this one messed up? How did they get confused? Isaiah 9, 3 through 7. Look at it. Look at it. Now watch this now. You have enlarged the nation and increased its joy. That you is Jesus. And Jesus ain't been born yet. This is a prophecy about what he will do. The people have rejoiced before you as they rejoice at harvest time and as they rejoice when they divide spoils. When you divide spoils, when you just whoop somebody's behind. Right? For you have shattered their oppressive yoke and the rod on their shoulders, the staff of their oppressor, just as you did in the day of Midian. For every trampling boot of battle and the bloody garments of war will be burned as fuel for fire. Verse 6. For a child will be born to us, a son will be given, the government will be on his shoulders, he will be named Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, and Prince of Peace. Verse 7. Though dominion will be vast, and his prosperity, watch this, will never end. He will reign on the throne of David over his kingdoms to establish and sustain it with justice, righteousness, watch this, from now on and forever. The zeal of the Lord of armies will accomplish this. Lord, have mercy. Do you see that right there? Now, I ain't going to exegete this text here, but clearly it is talking about the future Messiah. We don't got a name yet because he didn't tell him to the New Testament, name him Jesus and Emmanuel. All we know is this future Messiah, right, would do these things. So look what it says he's going to do. First, he will expand the influence of Israel. Number one. Two, the children of Israel will divide all the wealth of all the nations up. Three, the Messiah will lift the yoke of oppression off the backs of the people. Well, who was oppressing them right there? Rome. After defeating the occupying nation, the Messiah will burn up all the tools of war, and there will be peace. The government will be on his shoulders, which means all the world's government will rest on the back of the Lord. His kingdom will be expansive. He will sit on the throne of David, which is in Jerusalem, so he shall rule the world from Jerusalem, with that being the capital city. Y'all, this is just one prophecy about the future Messiah. You can see how the disciples would be disappointed about Jesus dying via crucifixion as a defeated troublemaker based on this prophecy about him. Can you see? Can you understand why they would do that? These two disciples right here, they are even more skeptical of the claims of the woman. Now, next week, we will clean and talk about that prophecy again and how we are to properly interpret that. But right now, I just want you to rest in that the disciples knew this text, and they have already affirmed during his life that he's the Messiah. What made them think that he wasn't the Messiah probably at the end was when he died. Because it says in this that his reign shall go on forever and ever. In other words, once he shows up, he's going to establish his kingdom, and it's going to go on forever and ever. Well, his life was cut off. So they were clearly confused, right, about this prophecy here and who Jesus was. Now let's go and go back to Luke 22 through 24. Let's go back to Luke. Luke 22 through 24. They're still talking to Jesus, and they're speaking. They say, moreover, some women from our group astounded us. They arrived early at the tomb, and when they didn't find his body, they came and reported they had seen a vision of an angel who said he was alive. Verse 24. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they didn't see the body. Now, you see that last phrase? That's kind of a pejorative or a negative. Yeah, they went down there, but what did they say? They ain't see the body. You see? Now, the disciples, they report this. The woman took care of Jesus, and the disciples went to the tomb early Sunday. What I told you, they take care of the body. They came to the empty tomb, received the angelic word. He's not here. He's been resurrected. Notice these two disciples said some of the disciples went to look at the tomb. They clearly didn't. They said some went to the tomb, right? They stayed back. This leads me to believe they didn't take the women too seriously, as they didn't even go to the tomb to verify the story. Now, what should they have done after hearing that the tomb was empty? What should they have done? What should have been their action plan? Come on. I got one person saying, pray. But what they should have been doing, let me go back and reread the Old Testament prophecies about Christ. Maybe I missed something. Let me go back and read Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, right? You know, Haggai, where he's predicted, Daniel. Let me go back and get into those to make sure I didn't miss something. Instead of arguing about the events that disappointed you, you should be going back to say, maybe I missed something, right? Maybe I didn't see something. Now, let me tell them again. Now, watch this now. Let me reread some prophecies or this. Jesus' own words when he was leading them. Well, if I can't remember or can't go to Old Testament text, what did he tell us when he was here? What did he say? Because Jesus gave an even more clear, right, or even more clear revelation than the Old Testament did, right? What did he say? Well, verse 21, verse 24, 21. as we begin to close down. What did our Lord, watch this, say when he was living? They should have went back. We're going to go over this next week. What did he say? But right now, I just want you to hang on that. They should have done two things. Go to the scriptures. As you struggle and don't understand the Lord and what's going on in your life, when things are happening that disappoint you and discourage you, don't run away from God, run to God. It's natural for us when God has disappointed us, and it's natural for us when God has discouraged. We feel like it was him that caused the discouragement. It was him. Guess what we do? It's natural to us to run away from God. This is what the disciples were doing. They was on the run. None of them showed up at the crucifixion, but John. They was in the house scared. And these two brothers, man, I ain't even going down to the tomb. That's a bunch of hogwash. So they weren't running to the Lord. They were running away from him. What they should have done is go back. Let me go open the scriptures or the Torah. They had that back there. They had the Old Testament back there. Let me look and see what those prophecies said. And then let's have a discussion. Me and two disciples, me and Pastor Hood walking down the street. Well, what did he say when he was here? What did he tell us when he was here? What were some of the things that he said when we said, did we miss something? Let's talk about that. In both cases, because everything Jesus said was scripture. So in both cases, you are remembering and you getting back to the basics when you don't understand, what has he told me? What do you mean, Pastor? Make this practical for me. If you are struggling right now, like I told you earlier, and you can't provide for your family and your faith is getting weak and all that kind of stuff, go back to what he told you. For I never leave you nor forsake you. I always provide your needs, right? I ain't say you once. You might not always get prime rib and a tomahawk steak. You might not always get big shrimp and scallops. I mean, you might get some a grilled cheese sandwich that night. You might get a box of macaroni. But did he provide for you? That's right. He took care of you, right? When I went to school, I ain't had nothing in my bank account. I started class with nothing in my bank account, just enough to pay for them, all my children and family, and halfway pay my rent. I ain't had a dime. And I went through school and don't owe no loans. So what I'm saying is, you see what I'm saying? When you don't understand, don't run from God. When you get angry, don't run from God. If you just buried somebody who you thought would be with you for the rest of your life, don't run from God. If you just had to go through some trials and tribulations and all that, don't run from God, run to God, get into the word and seek understanding. Because that's what they should have done. Look at verse 21. This will put the nail in the coffin for these brothers. We were hoping that he was going to be the one to redeem Israel. Well, watch this last phrase. Listen, audience, listen. Besides all this, it's the third day since these things happened. Now, if you're reading a story, that's an irrelevant fact, unless it means something, right? Why would a writer put that in there, right? Let me tell you why. The Jews generally believed that the spirit didn't leave the body until the third day. So now we read that. Well, nothing happened on Friday night. Nothing happened on Saturday. I don't think nothing happened on Sunday because it's the third day. So once the body got to the third day, it's over. Because they believe that the spirit didn't leave the body to the third day. So when he's saying it's the third day, ain't nothing popped off, we ain't seen him, he's basically saying all hope is gone. It's over. It's done. He's gone. Just a prophet, godly person, but Messiah, Redeemer, Prince of Peace, Everlasting Father, Son of Man, Son of God, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, Son of David. Just a prophet. Just a prophet. So we in there. The disciples are blinded, y'all. They are blinded. They can't see what's right in front of their face. You see the scene? Can y'all see the scene? Two disciples walking with the King of all kings, and they can't see it. They can't see it. he's as good as dead to them. One of the things sin does, y'all, it blinds us so that we cannot see truth. One of the things sin does when we run away from God instead of to him, sin blinds us. We can't see truth if it's sitting in front of our face like this. I ain't got to be no rocket scientist to tell y'all 2 + 2 is 4. Could you imagine seeing that numeric equation on paper and not being able to solve that now at your age? In some ways, it's almost like you just 2 + 2 is 5. You can't see it. 2 + ain't that 6? Right in front of your face, because sin can blind you. When you run away from God instead of to him, truth can sit in front of you and you can't see it. So this part 1, I'm going to leave right there. If you in this online audience or in here and you've been blinded by sin. Now, this don't just happen to you when you unsaved and you get saved. It also happens to us as believers sometimes. These men are believers. You know it's possible as a believer to fall into this where you can't see truth anymore. You lack wisdom. Why? Because somewhere you got bitter, you got discouraged, you lost hope, you gave up, right? And you start going the other way. You still come to church. You may still come to Bible study, but you're just there physically. You're not there mentally and spiritually. You're just sitting in a chair. You may be serving still, but you're still not running to the Lord. You're not seeing him as the source of all the answers to everything that you're going through. And so you've turned, you've lost hope, you are struggling. I'm going to leave this right here. But to those who don't know Christ, you got to give your life to the Lord. Now, for me now, audience, online as well, salvation is obvious to me. I can see it plainly. I can see my sin plainly, and I can see that he is the source of answer to my sin. I don't struggle anymore with the fact that we believe that Jesus, a historical figure that is attested to in the Bible as well as external sources, which are not the Bible, lived and died in around 30 AD at the hands of Pontius Pilate, and his resurrection was attested to by at least 500 people who lived at the same time that Jesus lived. So we don't have no struggle with that no more. I have accepted those facts. I not only believe Jesus emotionally because he changed my life, I believe in Jesus historically because the data is there to prove it. Amen. I believe it. The data is there. I have the word of God. Well, that's the word, and, they were just men. Let me tell you something about this word that's different from the Quran, that's different from any other book. The Quran was written by one person. One. Over a short amount of time. Just one. This book was here written over 1,500-year period. This book got 40 different writers who wrote on 3 different continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. And they have a coherent, logical story from Genesis to Revelations. Now, how can you get 40 people who lived in different times? Let me add one more nugget to that. Kings and regular old fishermen wrote some of the books. It wasn't just the scholars and the historian. Regular folk just like you who hang out at the barbershop wrote some of the books in here, as well as Solomon, who was the most glorious king and the wisest man to ever live. So in other words, the writers are a fall between king and they go as low as a dirty fisherman. You understand what I mean? That's why I believe this book. That's why I believe. But I was, look, audience, I was blinded to these truths when I was running away from God. I couldn't see them. If you're here today and you've been blind, only one can help you see is the Lord. You got to admit that you're blind. You have to admit you can't see. You have to admit it. Parents, you know what I'm talking about with this one. When you're raising your kids and you see them about to do one of the stupidest things ever, and you sit your son or daughter down, don't do that. Don't do that. And then you explain to them, even from your own lifestyle and mistakes. Here's what my kids have said to me before. Y'all heard it before. Dad, just because it happened to you don't mean it's going to happen to me. I know that happened to you. That don't mean what they saying is, let me interpret that. You got caught. I'm not. I can play with sin, enjoy myself, pull in and pull out, whatever it is, literally and figuratively, and I'm good. Right? They trying to beat the system. You can't do that. The same sins me, Pastor Hood, Brother Lou fell into 20 years ago, they same sins now wrapped in different packaging. It ain't changed. And when TJ, who is in his 20s now, gets to 40 and his little brother comes along, same sins. All Satan does is repackage the sin in each generation. You think we didn't have booty music when we was coming up? You think WAP and stuff like that is new? Well, that's built on my mama's generation who was listening to This Is Mrs. Jones. That's a song about adultery. And that thing in Marvin Gaye took it up one more notch. And then after Marvin Gaye, the Isley Brothers took it up one more notch. And then after them, it just kept going and going and going. And so the same sins we struggle with, y'all struggle with. We here to help y'all. But I can tell my children something sometime, and I just have to say, okay, it's right in their face, and they can't see it. And it's happening to me. So if you're here today and you don't know Christ, stop fighting him. Accept him. Admit you need him. B, you have to believe that Jesus Christ died for your sins. You have to, but you got to believe you're a sinner first before you even accept that. You are a sinner. A dirty, and I say you, let me make sure. We all, y'all, me, everybody, are sinners in need of God. All of us is funky. I don't care what you did in your life. All of us stank to God. Our lying, our deception. Well, I don't do that. You just lied. That's a lie. And if you haven't sinned verbally, what about, because God don't just judge you by what you actually do, he also judges you by what you think. Now, how do you get out of that? We sinners, y'all, we need him. We need him. Then you got to believe on him, and then you should confess him as Lord. Lord, you Lord. If you're willing to do that, please call our church, 734-728-3838. Please call. We will pray with you on the phone. If your life is really struggling, and that's the question I always ask people, how you doing with your own life? You got the keys now. You got the keys. Nobody is controlling you. You got the keys. I don't care, white folk, black folk, all that. Them problems are always going to be around. It's always going to be a hindrance to you. And once you stop making excuses, it's the blacks, it's the whites, it's the Republicans, it's the liberals, it's the Democrats, it's the hospitals, it's the president, it's the senators and all that. Once you get that all the way, you got to stand before a holy God. You got to ask yourself, how's your life going with you running it by yourself? And if you come to the conclusion I came to at 20 years old, man, I'm about to run this car off the road, you need help. So please make that decision today. If you did, and you need help, and you need prayer, please call us at 734-728-3838. Let us pray, and let's trust God. What a great time of worship we've had today. Dear Lord, I thank you and praise you for our time to share together. I thank you for the word. I pray and ask that as we go to part 2, we will be excited and anticipating Jesus is part of the conversation. The first part, he let the disciples do all the talking. The second part is when he begins to speak. We want to hear from you next week. I pray these things in thy son Jesus' name. Amen.